Welcome, everyone. This is our Parenting with Pride monthly webinar, and we are in February. And I feel like it was just the holidays, so I can't believe we're already in February. But we have a great program for tonight about a subject that I know is, no matter where you're living in Florida, is something that you should be educated on. I know a lot of us are definitely concerned, and we have the experts here tonight to really give us a sense of what this school of hope, although I like the schools of nope better, and what this really is going to mean for us um, as parents of specifically LGBTQ kids, how that could affect us, but really any parent that has a child in the public school system. This is something should be on your radar and something that you should be knowledgeable about. I hope we have some educators on here as well because it's going to affect you. As always, I want everyone to know that this is a safe place, and so if you would like to, in the chat, put your name, where you're coming from tonight in Florida. Great. If you don't want to, you don't have to. We do record our webinars, which means that on our Parenting with Pride YouTube channel, we have it, but it does not show names. It does not show the chat. But I am coming from y'all from the southern part of the state. I'm down in Miami, and I'm a parent of four, and I still have one kiddo who is in the public school system. So I am here learning along with everyone else tonight. And so couple quick rules. Um, if you have a question, you're welcome to do like the raise hand in the chat. You can put it in the chat. That's probably the easiest. We only have an hour. And so unfortunately, if we get to some questions that are very specific about, your school district or your school in general, we can certainly look into that and get back to you. But if you have questions, we'll have time at the end for a little Q&A, but feel free to put the information in the chat, and Amy Marie and Ellen, I'm sure, will get to it. So with that being said, I would love to introduce our experts tonight, two folks that I absolutely admire and look up to as advocates in the state, because I see them all the time in so many spaces, especially the public education space. We have Amy Marie Granger Welch, and she is a dedicated public education advocate with over a decade of experience in grassroots organizing, legislative engagement, and nonprofit leadership. She is the Deputy Director of Families for Strong Public Schools, which leads efforts to advance pro-school student policies and mobilize communities across Florida. And if y'all have not seen, I'm sure you have, if you are on social media, you will see all the information that they put out. It is an incredible organization that is really my go-to when I want to know what is going on with the education system here in Florida. I mean, Amy Marie, you and your team really are on top of that. Your advocacy is shaped by your roles. You have many roles that have been local and in state PTA leadership, and you're definitely committed to equity, transparency, and community, and having a voice in the education policy. So we are very excited to have Amy Marie here. And we also have Ellen Lyons, who is a longtime PTA lady. I've seen her at our conventions, and I know that you have held many roles in local units in the Hillsborough County Council PTA. She is presently the VP of Hillsborough Special Education PTA and a member of our Kaleidoscope, which is one of the folks that we put these presentations on with, is our Kaleidoscope PTA. Ellen has also served as chair of the Hillsborough County School Board Finance Committee and on the Citizen Advisory Committee for the school district. And if she doesn't do all of that, she does have a day job, and she is a lawyer. And so having that background, I'm sure, really helps with a lot of the legal stuff that we see coming out of our legislature. So we love to have someone who actually is trained in all of that and put that to good use in your advocacy. So welcome to both of you. Welcome to Parenting with Pride. And I'm going to turn it over to you so that we can get started. Like I said, we only have an hour, and I'm going to go on mute, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you for joining us.
I will talk as fast as I can and move us through this. Jen said, thank you for the intro. I do work for Families for Strong Public Schools. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit working in the public education advocacy space. So, Schools at Nope is our campaign for against the co-location issue that we're kind of talking about tonight. So that's where Schools of Nope comes in. But we're going to walk through it. So thank you for being here. We're going to break it down what the co-location rules actually do, why communities across Florida are organizing against it, and most importantly, how we can protect our kids and build a local plan to protect our schools. So tonight I'm going to explain what Schools of Hope is, how it evolved, and then we'll unpack the new co-location rule, what changed, what it means for students based in school programs. We'll walk through, we do have a toolkit. I'll walk through some of the resources that we have. And then you'll leave with some concrete actions you can take, maybe an organizing plan you can start right now, tomorrow, tonight in your own community. So let's talk about what are schools of hope? Because that's a good question. People are asking that question. So this didn't happen overnight. The Schools of Hope law was originally marketed as a targeted intervention for persistently low performing schools. In reality, it created a parallel system of privately run charter operators with almost no local oversight and special fast track privileges. So these operators are approved at the state level, not locally. That shift in authority is important because it sets the stage for what the new rule allows. In 2025, lawmakers quietly slipped in new expansion language into the state budget. In the wee hours of the evening, at the very last moment, I'm sure everybody remembers how long the last 2025 our session was. It failed to pass through normal debate. This was not a popular bill by any stretch of imagination. And many of our legislators didn't really even realize that they were voting for a statewide takeover plan. Um, and so this new rule now forces districts to pay for transportation, food service, and maintenance for buildings they no longer control, while these schools of hope operators move in rent free. And if a district wants to object, they have just 20 days before the decision becomes final. And local school boards have no real say, only state appointed magistrates do. So what changed? So in 2025, the state board adopted Rule 6A 1 point, lots of numbers and letters, which dramatically expands the power of HOPE operators. So this rule gives state approved charter operators the ability to move into district owned buildings, access entire district student information systems, use local resources and facilities rent free, and override decisions made by our locally elected school boards. And this is not about school improvement. It's about a state level takeover and privatization of our public education infrastructure. If you look at these letters of intent that have been filed, there is a slow growth pattern through the years to take over these spaces and completely push out our local public schools. So, why did it change? So, the truth about why the Schools of Hope law changed, it really has nothing to do with helping kids. I know we're not surprised. So, this legislation was pushed by some of the most powerful political donors and charter franchises in the country. Billionaire Ken Griffin, the hedge fund CEO who moved to Miami and immediately became one of the biggest political donors in Florida, teamed up with Success Academy, which is a New York charter chain, to run a coordinated lobbying campaign to rewrite Florida law. Success Academy didn't just support the bill, they drafted the original text themselves. They sent lawmakers their talking points, and Griffin's lobbyists arranged private strategy meetings with key decision makers, including Jennifer Kennedy, Senate President Ben Albritton, and their senior staff. At the same time, Griffin poured more than $28 million into Florida politics during the 2024 cycle alone. This included multi-million dollars checks to the political committees controlled by the Speaker of the House and the Senate President, and the very leaders who championed this bill. And after a chaotic legislative session, they pushed this policy through at the last minute as part of the budget, which meant no real debate, no public transparency, and minimal scrutiny. So when we ask why this law changed, the answer is clear. It wasn't driven by community needs or student outcomes. It was driven by money, influence, and private interests reshaping public education for their own gain. So once we understand who is behind the bill, We can see why they pushed for such a dramatic expansion. After this lobbying effort, the Department of Ed rewrote the definition of what counts as a low performing school. And this is where that overnight, that list of opportunity schools that they could co-locate in ballooned from 51 schools to 267, which included A-rated and B-rated schools. This artificial manufactured crisis opened the door for charter franchises to claim territory almost anywhere in the state. Success Academy didn't just lobby for policy changes, they asked lawmakers for about $50 million in startup funds and up to $5,000 in ongoing bonus payments for every student they serve, on top of the existing Schools of Hope subsidies. This isn't about saving struggling schools, it's about building a publicly subsidized revenue model for private operators. And this new law lets charters open schools miles away from so-called low-performing campuses they're supposedly helping, and it lets them serve 0 students from the targeted school. And it forces districts to hand over classrooms inside public school buildings for free, even in high-performing or affluent communities. And this is not a rescue plan for kids. Again, a statewide privatization pipeline engineered to redirect our public dollars, our tax money, public space, and public authority into the hands of private charter corporations. And it was built by design. How does it work? So here's how it plays out. A HOPE operator pre-approved by the state. There are 7 approved operators. More can be added. That's up to the DOE, obviously. They identify what they call underused space. The district must hand over that space even in thriving schools. Students and programs can be displaced, while the district must still cover those core costs, which we discussed a little bit earlier. And one of the biggest issues, the operator is granted access to the district's student information system. There aren't a lot of real clear, it's very vague in the language right now. So that's concerning. So not just the students they serve, but all students. So this means private operators can use personally identifiable data for recruitment, targeting, and marketing inside public schools. Like I said, there's 7 different HOPE operators right now. So when a charter co-locates, space isn't magically created. That's obvious, right? We know some of our schools feel very full, even if they're under capacity, right? It really does come at the expense of the kids already learning in that building. And we need to be absolutely clear. Co-location does not mean relocation. They're not relocating a school with students. They're co-locating and trying to draw students from the district into their school. So this isn't a matter of like they're moving an existing school into a public school. This public school doesn't move out, not initially, right? The charter doesn't move into an empty building. The co-location means a second school with no students of its own is inserted inside a fully operating public school. And these operators arrive without student body. They're not relocating an existing school. They're using the co-location role to gain access to district space, student data, so they can recruit and poach students directly from the school they're moving into. And that's important to know, right? Ellen.
I wanted to note that the rule also requires that the space that is given to the charter operator be contiguous space. So for example, there's a Tampa elementary school that has 3 empty classrooms, 1 in 2nd grade, 1 in 3rd grade, 1 in 4th grade. Those might be different rooms that are on the spokes of a wheel. The charter operator doesn't just have to take the space that's empty. The school actually has to consolidate the existing classrooms and move people so that they can provide the charter operator with 3 contiguous classrooms.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's additional imposition on our students.
For sure. That's a great point because we know.
Sorry.
Because we know, that empty classroom that may be in that 3rd grade wing could be used for ESE services, for specialized pullouts, for therapy, for maybe it's the art and music room. It could be accessed for different parts of the curriculum that don't really show up on a report of space, which we could talk about later.
Yeah, and they also get to use proportionate space in the cafeteria, etc. But what really concerns me is the athletics facilities, because they will be able to block the public school from using the athletic facilities on at least one night a week, because they'll be able to use proportionate athletic facilities for their games.
For sure. The impacts to like every part of the school day, like Ellen is
Mhm.
saying, class sizes change, intervention schedules need to change,
Mhm.
inclusion and IEP supports, before and after school programs, safety and traffic flow, student well-being and teacher capacity. Like the list goes on and on. And
Mhm.
families, they need to understand that this doesn't add option, it subtracts from the school our kids already attend. This isn't a collaborative, it's a hostile insertion of a charter with no students to bring to the table. So, when we talk about co-location, it's often framed as a facilities or efficiency issue, but for our LGBTQ students, it's a safety issue as well. So, when schools lose space, the first places to go are often the ones that protect our students the most. GSA and Pride clubs lose their meeting rooms or get pushed off campus entirely. Counseling offices, wellness rooms, safe spaces are downsized and shared. We have schools in New York City that are co-locating, and counseling's happening in hallways, or it's happening in spaces that are technically a closet. Um, that makes trusted adults become even harder to access privately. So for many LGBTQ students, school is the only place they feel safe being themselves. And when that space disappears, so does that sense of security. It doesn't just reduce space, it removes safety.
Oh, and can I add something about
Yes, ma'am.
what they use is there's the Florida Inventory of Schoolhouses. This is how they determine what's an unused space. Take the square footage divided by the number of students and figure out how many students they could potentially fit in there. Some of those spaces are not really places where you could put a student station. And so oftentimes they depend on the special needs of the school, but there isn't a lot of ability of schools to fight back on that basis.
And they can put a high school. They could put ninth grade to 12th grade in a K-5 school. They could put a middle school in a high school. Like there's no limitations on what that co-located school serves. So that's
Right.
an
And
important thing to know. Like, do we really want our high schoolers hanging out with their kindergartners? Is that a safe environment for our kids to be in?
I worry
So,
about ESE. If you have a school that serves a large ESE population, maybe it's elementary school, and then you have a high school next door. Not next door, excuse me, under the same
in the
roof,
same,
perhaps with a
yeah,
different bell schedule, but different discipline codes too.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, it can be very bad.
yeah. So co-location, it doesn't really happen in a neutral policy environment, right? Especially in Florida. So our LGBTQ students are already navigating restrictive state policies, which we know, that limit discussion of identity and self-expression. And forced co-location magnifies that harm by introducing the new operators with different rules, values, and discipline systems onto that same campus. Students suddenly face inconsistent protections depending on where they're at in the building. So once was very clear becomes confusing, and once what felt safe becomes uncertain. So more systems don't mean more safety, they mean more risk, especially in this situation where you do have a school that doesn't have to comply with the same set of rules and standards that a traditional public school would have to comply with. So one of the most overlooked dangers of co-location is the student data access. Now, in the proposed in the proposed rules, there is a little bit of a language change, and we know obviously we have FERPA, um, but we also know the uh, the U.S. Department of Education is the one that is in charge of enforcing that. And do we really trust that is going to be um, is that going to be happening moving forward? So they do gain access to district student information systems, and even if that is just for a student maybe that applies to the school and comes to school, that data can really include counseling records, gender markers, family status, and sensitive information. So there really are no clear guardrails on how that data is used, shared, or protected. And for LGBTQ students, even accidental disclosure, being outed without consent, can cause some serious harm at home, at school, or in their community. So privacy isn't optional. Privacy is protection. So this is one that I am most, I get most concerned with, because there is the standards are very different for a charter than they are um, for a traditional public school. So shared campuses can, like Ellen alluded to, they can be disproportionately affected by instability. And a shared campus creates exactly that, because you have supervision and accountability standards that can be completely different. You could even have a charter school that decides to do the guardian program, and they can arm teachers. In a traditional public school, that they don't do that. So there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of things that can really be concerning as far as clarity and for the safety of our kids. So, and when we have that unclear accountability, what happens? Bullying increases. So affirming school culture gets diluted or erased. As students stop using bathrooms, offices, and activities they once maybe felt safe accessing, because there is that, unknown what's happening with this part of the school. It's on a different bell schedule. There's different rules, there's different standards, that the anxiety rises, mental health suffers, and learning really becomes secondary to survival. So school climate really does matter, and co-location just destabilizes that. Obviously, when families don't feel safe, participation drops. And we know family engagement increases student success on every level for all students. LGBTQ families feel this immediately, because they're going to stop attending those school events, because there may be some inconsistency in messaging and who who is who is running these events and what the safety standards are. Students will withdraw when affirmation disappears, attendance declines. We already are in attendance crisis, really, in our state, which affects that academic outcome. That will suffer. And then this harm doesn't really stop with individual students. It ripples across our entire school, and then weakens trust, engagement, and connection. So trust isn't really a nice thing to have. It's foundational to learning. Students need to trust that the environment is safe, and so do our families. So this policy is not neutral. Our LGBTQ students already experience higher rates of bullying, harassment, and self-harm. Co-location removes the ability of local communities to design environments that protect them. State mandated override community-based protections and silence our local voices. And that's not equity, that's abandonment. That is a distraction from keeping our kids safe and allowing them to learn. Our public schools must remain accountable to all students, and equity requires intentional protection. So that was a lot of bad news. So I'm going to move on to some good news. The good news is that harm is not inevitable, and organizing around this does work. We know from past experience that when we organize and we come together, we can protect our kids. It means centering their voices and the voices of our caregivers. And it means partnering together with our GSAs, our pride organizations, our PTAs, our PTOs, our education foundations. Everybody who has a stake in the future of our society should be engaged in this, because it really does mean a further privatization of our public schools. So we need to demand transparency about the space use, data access, pushing on our school boards to get the messaging out. They should not be sitting on their hands waiting for the legislators to make a change, or the Department of Education to do something, because they need to be educating their communities. They need to be demanding, more support locally, and more power locally. Um, these policies endanger students, and organizing is how we're going to intervene and how we're going to keep our students safe. Do you have anything to add, Ellen? I know I'm very wordy.
Oh, no, you're doing a very good job.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I would just note that we have had incredible success with organized campaigns in the past.
Yes.
In fact, last year, we fought the legislature's attempt to cut the funding for AP, IB, and career and technical education programs by 50%. And through overwhelming communication, the legislature abandoned that effort. This can be the same way. And what we need is a repeal of the 2025 rule, of the 2025 changes to the statute. The statute is the place that says no cost. The statute is the place that defines who, where schools of hope can go. So the rule, so if your legislator tells you that they're trying to address this through rulemaking for the Department of Education, tell them the worst parts are actually in the statute. The Department of Education does have a new rule, but it's going to actually conflict with the statute because the statute says no cost and the rule says there will be cost. Which do you think is going to win? And so, talk to your legislator about those things.
For sure. So I'll just move through a couple things you can do locally and kind of the tools that we have that you can utilize. So
Amy, real quick, there's a question in the chat, and I don't know if you're going to be getting to it, but since we're kind of at a point, the question is there a public place where this is tracked, where schools can be co-located to or being considered? Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that's going to be later in here, and if not, I just want to address that.
Yes, it's actually within the toolkit that I'm going to cover. So I'll talk about some of the pieces of the toolkit, and then I'll give you guys I'll have Ellen drop the link in where if you'll drop the www.schoolsofnope.org in the chat, and people can go there. So when we talk about organizing, obviously you need some resources for that, which is where Families for Strong Public Schools comes in. We've created a Schools of Nope. We call it Schools of Nope because we do not want them in our schools. And it has key talking points. It has overviews of the statute. It has overviews of the rules, the proposed rules, all of that stuff. It has social media toolkits. It has community conversation resources, educational one-pagers just to simply hand out to parents. It has all sorts of resources so that you can educate yourself so that you can educate others, because that's really the goal for that. So organizing will shift the outcome of this, and more parent voices and community voices in this fight will absolutely shift the outcome. We saw that last year. We've seen that with many different initiatives the legislature tries to push down our throat. So we talk about building our base, starting where we are, whether it's your PTA, within your educators in your school, especially if you are at a school that has received a letter of intent, that's what they're called. Or if you're on the list of schools that, there are some that have been approved because they have no other choice, because this school district doesn't really have much choice in this matter. It's up to the state to make the final decision. So we do have resolutions for your PTA, for your SAC, sample email, sample texts, kind of a spread the word section for you to start getting that information out to your base. Just that group of people that you meet for coffee every, Tuesday, that's your base. That's where you start. So mapping your community, that means identifying who is impacted, who has influence, and who those natural connectors are, where your strongest relationships exist. So maybe you already have a relationship with your school board member. That's a great person who should have a lot of power that you can lean on to hopefully get this information out to families within the community. So school board members, Department of Education is a target, Attorney General is a target. This is a parents' rights issue as well. Think about sharing student data. It's kind of a huge issue. Local legislators, if you already have a relationship you've built with a local legislator, start there. Talk to them about the bills that we are trying to push forward, which I can share in a minute. Yes, we do have a list of districts and schools targeted for co-location. I can share that. We have social media toolkits and things like that you can drop in Facebook groups or share on your local community pages and things like that. So we understand that the power is in the relationship, and that's really the foundation of organizing. So in the toolkit, you will find resources that will support that relationship-based organizing. We have constructing a narrative section, talking points for school board. If you are comfortable going to school board meetings and speaking at school board meetings, that's a natural place to start. We can equip you with some talking points to help you advocate for your school board members to speak out, do some town halls, do some educating in the community. And then tips for meeting with legislators, things like that. Storytelling. This is important. Facts inform, but the stories really activate. So how this is going to impact your local school, or how this, that the impacts are going to be felt in your community. Those are the stories that you're going to want to talk to your legislators and your community leaders about, leading with those shared values and reflecting on the lived experiences to the issue. So we do have a whole thing on crafting your narrative. I'm kind of speeding through this, but I'm always happy to stop on anything if anybody wants more information. So making that hard ask, always have that clear call to action. If you go to our social media page at Families for Strong Public Schools, you will see every single post has a clear call to action. We're going to ask you to write an email. We're going to ask you to, click and send an email or make a phone call or share something. There's always going to be a clear ask. So hosting a community conversation with 5 of your friends just to start talking about how you guys are going to take action in your community, within your group of friends and people that you may know. Again, we have all the resources for creating a column for our kids. If you want to host a phone bank, we host a phone bank every Thursday at noon. If you register for that, you get the weekly script. So the script will change based on where legislation is traveling. If it's moved into a different committee, or if we're trying to pressure a different lawmaker, the script changes. This past week, it was calling all of the chairs and vice chairs for all of the committees up along the path of the bills. And then we also had a call to action for SB 318, which is a totally different bill, but it's a accountability bill. So we're obviously pushing that as well, because we like some accountability in our funds that we're spending on in our schools. So 4 simple steps. Schedule 3 one-on-one conversations. Go talk to your school board member, talk to your PTA president, talk to people about, to ask them if they know what's happening and how they can be involved. Go to our Facebook page. There's lots of information there. Go to schoolsofnope.org, educate yourself. You can always book an appointment with me and we can do a one-on-one as well. If you want to plan a Schools of Nope community conversation in your community, we do have organizers across the state in various counties. We also can Zoom in from anywhere. Obviously, I'm in Hillsborough, as is Ellen, but we have done Zooms all over the state from the comfort of our living room or our kitchen or office. So we're always happy to do that, or connect you with somebody that can come in person. So stay connected, visit schoolsofnope.org, sign up for the actions and events, because then you'll stay in the loop of what's happening. We do have a statewide organizing network. We help organize statewide, not just one county or one specific part of the state. And we follow the legislation as it moves through session and moves through the legislature, and keep people updated on what's happening. Spread the word. This is all about getting the information out there. Like Ellen said, make sure you're telling people about this is super important, because the action that with the AP funding, that would not have happened without parent and community pressure. We would not have gotten that far. So we know that there is a rub, that we know that there is some friction in the legislature. We are hearing the rumblings of this being an issue that they're going to take up. So we got to keep the pedal down. And if you're ready to get started, you can always scan that or reach out to me, which is right here at Amy Marie. But that's it. I will stop talking because I'm sure people have some questions. I tried to move through it as fast as possible. Carrie.
Hey there. First of
Hey there.
all, excellent presentation. Thank you so much, Amy Marie and Ellen. Great to meet you, Ellen. Excellent resources. So just thank you. Thank you for all of this work. I have, and because of that, my first is a question slash suggestion. Jen, I think you said that this is recorded and is available even on a YouTube link. So my first thought was, which I'm going to do, I already thought of 3 spaces or 3 groups of people I'm going to share that link in, because just excellent for people to see this. So that's real easy, right? I'm certainly going to share this. And when does that become available? That like a link that we can share of this presentation.
Yeah, just give me a couple days because we kind of cut it and put like a cute little beginning and
Okay,
ending, and then it takes a day
sure.
to upload. So I would say by what are we on Wednesday? I would say by Monday it should be live.
Okay,
And
cool.
then I'll
That's
send a
There
follow-up.
there's also some videos on the website that you can share. So we've done this presentation before. This one specifically, I put in just some more slides for LGBTQ
right.
families that are more specific, but there's a more condensed one without those slides. That's
We
just
can
the
find other things.
organizing. Yeah, that's on the website. So, and that's already on YouTube. So you can share those too.
Excellent. I will definitely do that. And then I have a question about just the timeline of all this. And even if this repeal or the doesn't make it through this session, obviously any kind of awareness raising and education is great advocacy, even if it's. But I've just a question about the timeline, because we already deep in session, and it doesn't sound like the bills have too much movement. And just sort of how does that compare to when these schools of hope would take effect? Sort of just trying to marry our efforts to when this takes effect, and what we're looking at. If we're going to be almost certainly fighting it after it takes effect, or there's any chance we might get ahead of it.
Well, it's already in statute. So it's
So there's
already
already
in
schools of
it's
hope
already
out there.
in play. So you do have, like, I know you're in Miami. I have
Right.
the list of schools that will be facing co-location in 2027. So most of these are set to start in 2027. So yes, while
Okay.
I would say we still have time to fight. Obviously, nothing's over until it's over, because clearly this legislation was dead in the water until the wee hours of the very last day of session. So there's nothing to say that that can't happen again. And that's what we're fighting for. We will fight to the bitter end to get this repealed, because this is the takeover of our public schools. This is not, no matter what way they look, I don't know what they could do to the rules that would change this. And there's no indication that they have any intention of listening to any of the people, the comments and all of the things that have been pushed out there. Because we've been actively engaging in that as well. Because there are different, Ellen can talk about like the different levels, obviously, for.
Yeah, and I hate to sound pessimistic. Absolutely, this can come in as an
Mhm,
amendment even after,
mhm.
subcommittee meeting stops. So yeah, certainly fight to the end. I was just trying to get a sense of, there are no schools of hope in place yet, right? You said 2027.
No,
Yeah,
there.
there most.
Good to know. Yeah, I was
Well,
just
no, there are schools of hope
Mhm.
active in the state right now. There's 12.
okay.
Are there any co-located schools?
Okay.
Not yet. Those would be, they're proposed to co-locate in 2027. But
Okay.
some, especially, I believe in Miami, have been approved for co-location.
So
That's
that's
correct.
leads into my last question, which is that, okay, so there's no schools hope that have sort of co-located. When you talk about just in the last few slides, storytelling, which I agree, that's the most powerful thing, right? Do we have, aside from like sort of like kind of anticipating the impacts of how this would affect our students, do we have or can we draw from examples, and maybe, and usually when we're facing something, it's likely that it happens in some way, shape, or form historically. So sometimes it's good to
Yes.
dig into that history and pull out those effects. And so if that would be helpful for folks to
Yes.
do, or if there's already stories that we can access as far as like the
If
impact that this would.
if you go to schoolsandnope.org and you go to there is a YouTube that we did with New York City.
Okay.
New York City has co-located charters in their schools, and they talk about some of the impacts that have happened. One of the most important things to understand is that, and I know we all know this because our communities change, right? Especially where I live in Hillsborough, our communities change, so the makeup and the the seats in our schools decrease and increase. They change based on what's happening in our neighborhoods. Some of our neighborhoods have more kids in them now, and as growth happens out in the more rural parts of our county, those schools get filled with students. So one of the things they talk about that has happened in New York City, there when the co-located co-located school loses seats, because we know historically students don't typically stay in charter schools, they come back to our traditional public schools. There's no mechanism to get that space back. So a traditional public school may have 300 extra seats available today. A year from now, that may change, and then that co-located school is in there, there's decrease. There's no ebb and flow for that space. There's no mechanism to get that space back from the co-located charter either. So there's a lot of potential impacts that I think we won't feel until there's actually one co-located, plus the impacts to every single student in your district, because now the school district is responsible for maintaining the space, upgrading the space, providing transportation, covering nutrition costs, and they're not, safety, all the different things in the building. So that money's got to come from somewhere. It's going to come from our students that are currently in schools in our district. I think, yeah. So like you asked, yes, there's a video, and that's a good video. There's a lot of parents from New York City that talk about all the things that have impacted their kids in New York City from this co-location. Anybody else?
There's a question in the chat. I think you talked about what would happen to the public school, but the question here is following up. If it is repealed, what happens to the co-located schools? So I think you touched on what happens to the public school, which means you don't get back those seats. But if we were able to repeal this, I guess the question, and whoever's asking this, feel free to come off mute, and follow up. What would happen to that co-located school if this was repealed?
So the co-located school, if it's repealed, would not be able to co-locate. The School of Hope would not be able to co-locate in the school in the first place. So the goal is to not allow this at all. They're not relocating schools into schools. They're co-locating the space and coaching students.
They're
taking seats.
Right. And then
there's no students in the seats.
No, they're taking seats.
Right.
But then they're also getting with that the incremental cost of electrical power and student nutrition and busing and things like that. And then as they take more seats, you could have a public school that is co-located where the charter operator is still getting the same $9,000 per pupil funding that the public school is getting in any given year. Because remember, the idea here is that it's a backpack full of cash. Each child represents, let's say, $9,000 as a nice arbitrary number, all right? If this child in the co-located school brings $9,000 to the charter operator, but the charter operator does not pay any costs for the student nutrition, for the nursing, all that kind of stuff, the charter operator is getting a lot more money. But what's interesting is that in no way is the charter operator getting any more money to address students that are supposed to be historically underperforming schools. That's why this is really kind of gives up the game, because this is about getting $9,000 in the pocket of a charter operator, shifting the expenses onto the public school, taking, you could have 10 public school students where they're providing all the student nutrition services for 900 co-located kids, and that's just the law. Think about how little money would be left in that public school if the charter pulls away all of the resources. But because the idea was that we're going to give people an option for failing schools, this isn't really about that. It's apparent that it's not about that at all. Oh, the bill numbers. House Bill 6023, and then Senate Bill 424. Those are the ones that are repealing. Okay, so if you think about it, at the end of like June 28th, June 29th of last year, of 2025, they were coming very close to failing to meet their only constitutional imperative, which is the legislature must approve a budget to send to the governor. They must do that. That's their only obligation in any given legislative session. And they were throwing around a lot of numbers, these things that we had successfully beaten back during the regular session. These changes got put into a budget bill. A lot of people did not understand that's what they were choosing to vote for, the legislators. And if we don't get rid of this through repealing it, then we're going to be looking at people who are going to start asserting property rights in our schools by August of 2027. So that's why we want to repeal.
Yeah, this is so, this is so eye-opening. And I think that, the fact that most parents of public school kids have no idea that this could happen to their school, because like you said, the language seems to be, it's, under performing schools. And we know for a fact that it is not. That by the time that parents, I think, really realize what this is and the dangers to it, it is going to be too late, because they are going to already be there. And, in my mind, I'm seeing this co-location. They come in with no students, which that was news to me. I thought they brought in students, and they don't. So they really just come in and look at the students' data. And of course, they're going to see which kids they want, because they want to be able to show that their co-location School of Hope is, doing well on their testing and all that. So they are, I'm sure, going to be very targeted on who they want to pull over into those seats. And we all know what happens is, once that starts happening, it's just going to be, everyone's going to jump on that bandwagon, and we will lose that public school, because why would your child be in the public school side of the actual school, not receiving all the perks of the kids that are now in that same school, but in this School of Hope? So yeah, this is really, it's quite unbelievable that they're able to do this. And I think that we need to mobilize all of these ideas. I think, I hope everyone here takes these ideas and talks to other parents. And, we really need, the time is now for us to make noise, because they're counting on us not to. And like you said, Ellen, when they were pulling that funding for the AP and stuff, and parents got wind of that, all of a sudden that was affecting their kid. We need more parents to understand this will affect any child in the public school system, and we have to be loud about it and let them know that we don't want it. So thank you both for really bringing to light a lot of this. If folks have any other questions, you're welcome. Carrie's got another question. You can do your raise hand, or you can put it in the chat. Go ahead, Carrie.
Yeah, is there any particular way that you have heard that some schools are organizing around this locally that we can maybe suggest to other schools that have not activated or yet?
We have school districts that are actively in the community, engaging with community members to highlight the dangers of this. So we do have, I know Sarasota has worked on a proposed solution to the open seats, and they're kind of reconfiguring some of their schools and working with community partners to remove open space that might be attractive to a charter operator. So they're looking at some creative ways in some districts to, not have space by providing different, getting the community to give them input on, as it should be. The community should really be the ones driving what happens to the school in their community. If they need more childcare resources or after school resources or what have you, if there is empty space in a school, like it should be a community driven effort. So that is good to hear. But there are schools in Miami, I don't know because I'm not down in Miami. We do have organizations down there and we do have an organizer in Miami that's willing to organize around it. The League of Women Voters is activating around it. FEA has been active in trying to get the information out to educators because we know educators are busy people working to educate our kids, not so much maybe paying strict attention to this kind of thing that can really impact them as well. And then the Florida PTA is also actively pushing information out to their local units to try to get them to have community conversations. We do have some up in Seminole that have had community conversations and are engaging with legislators and school board members to actively fight this. So there are school communities that are coming together, but it is really about getting that message out, having community conversations, town halls, whatever you call it in your community that will work for your community, going to where they can commune. Sometimes the school isn't the place people come together at. Maybe it's a different event, but or a different organization. Maybe your PTA isn't their jam, but you do have or other organizations within your community that are doing some of that advocacy work, engaging with them to get them out to help you get this message out. It's really going to be about all of us just telling every darn person we know.
Yes, and in addition to emailing, we've also done some postcard campaigns.
Yeah.
Postcard parties. Yeah. And yeah. I was in the Capitol 2 weeks ago, and I saw a postcard that had been created at one of our postcard parties in the inbox of a legislator. So that was actually pretty cool because we know that person got the postcard.
Yeah. Yeah, we do have a postcard party toolkit. If that's something that works, just to get people out to actively engage in doing something tangible. Sometimes that's a good way to just get people talking about this. But yeah, you'll see the toolkit's quite robust, but I'm happy to build anything out that anybody needs. So, and if you need it in Spanish, I do have a Spanish toolkit linked within the toolkit because we do have, I do have someone who speaks Spanish who can do like a Zoom. She's in Hillsborough, but she can do outreach and create materials in Spanish if that's a resource you need. I would say, yeah, there's definitely a concern they would poach educators and dwindle that resource too. Yeah, absolutely. And where are they? I mean, teachers, we already have a teacher shortage in Florida. So I would say that is definitely a concern. However, they don't have to hire, they don't always have certified educators. So that's always.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to point out as well. Yeah. The wonderful thing about public school, and I always, as a parent who comes to me and especially, if they have an LGBTQ child and they're worried about their rights in the schools, the first thing I always ask, please tell me you're in public school, because we know private schools are able to make their own rules, which they should, right? Like if you're a parent and you want, a very strict religious, right? Like there are private schools for you. The problem with our charter schools is they take our funding, but they don't have to follow the same rules. And so, that is very scary of what are their standards as far as like hiring educators. We have our LGBTQ student guides in many of our districts that we, are able to go in and say, well, your guide was approved by your school board attorney, by the state. Those will all go out the window in a school like this, because you would have, the public school side of it that maybe would hold, those teachers and students to those standards. And then, across the hall in another classroom, they make their own rules. So it is very scary on so many levels. But this point of of the educators. If they're going to say, listen, if you become, you've been at the school for 20 years, you're a great educator, we're going to give you a $50,000 bonus to be teaching, as a school of hope. It's going to be very hard for our teachers not to, not to do that. And again, this is not making our education system better. This is just lining the pockets of the very wealthy. So, really good point about the education system, about the educators, because that's very scary.
I just put a presentation that we have that kind of outlines the differences between schools. We did it for the League of Women Voters, and it just kind of outlines what the accountability and transparency is for each type of school, what the oversight is for our public schools, our charter schools, and our private schools and voucher schools. So you're more than welcome to check that out. It's literally 9 slides, so it's pretty tight. But I'm happy to answer questions on that one too, because I think that's an important thing to understand. If you're starting from that base of knowledge, understanding the differences in accountability is very important in this conversation. Yes, the school libraries would need to be, they'd need to have the same, they need to have access to the space. So yes, the school library would be part of that space that they'd have to be able to access and share with a co-located School of Hope. Yes.
And the PE also, right? The field, if it's a high school, any of the training facilities, all of that, and they could take priority over it. And so I know that there was a presentation where someone was sharing in New York City that there was a school that the children in the public school didn't have access to to recess. They, because the co-location school had come in and really monopolize that area. So yeah, it's going to affect a lot of different spaces within the schools.
Yeah, I wanted to note that the question was actually, would the school libraries conform with the rules of the charter? And that's not resolved at all. That's one of the things that is very, very unclear. There's a discussion in the rule that's being proposed about having management organizations forcing the charter and the public school to work together. I cannot imagine that the charter would be able to, because the state laws that govern books and public schools would probably apply, but what if the charter wanted to have more or different books? I don't know the answer to that question. It's a really good question.
Yeah, Trisha, I know that the library thing that's a hot topic too. So, because the public has to have access to every single book in the library through, they have to have access to it digitally. And is that going to be the same standard for charter schools? I don't know that they have to conform to that standard. So I would say that's definitely a question. And sometimes when you guys ask me these questions, I'm like, these are the questions we need to be asking legislators. Mm-hmm. These are the questions you need to be calling and saying, hey, what about this? What about that? Because I think from an educator perspective, a parent who volunteers in a school, if anybody who has worked in a public school or a school, like the mind boggle of this, like just the idea of this and these questions that come up, these are the questions we need to be going, how is this going to work? This is not feasible for our kids. And I think that the questions people ask are always things I'm like, these need to be asked of our legislators. You have magnet schools. Magnet schools are traditional public school options. They usually have they have to go. I don't know how it works in whatever county you're in. I know how it works in Hillsborough. You have to apply through the school choice, and there's like a lottery system, and students get selected based on whatever the lottery is based on.
Yeah, I think if it's an arts program, I think there's certain
standards for certain Yeah, I mean, my daughter did a magnet program for middle and high school, actually, and I know that we were active duty military, and I do know military tends to get a little like a heavier weighting for things or something. But other than that, it just depends on the magnet. But it is a traditional public school, so yes, it could potentially. Some of the schools that have been targeted are magnet schools. So yes, it will reduce your magnet options because space is space. If there's not enough space and the co-located charter is taking the space, then who suffers in this equation is really the question.
ESE kids are who suffer in this equation.
All of our kids, all of our
Yeah, but
everybody, yeah.
ESE
But
kids
our kids that are most
lose
vulnerable are gonna.
spots. Because keep in mind, a normal kid, not normal, but like a kid that doesn't have a 504 can take a spot in the public school or in the co-located charter. ESE kid can take a spot in the public school, and if that spot is taken by a co-located charter, it's less spots for the ESE kid.
Yeah, that's a really good point because they are able to look in and pick and choose of who they want to be in
Correct.
those
And they
spaces,
will have our student information system in order to be able to do that.
which is
Oh, and by the way, there's actually quite a bit of push right now for charter operators to get parent emails, either through litigation, public records requests, and things like that. So we're going to be seeing a lot of marketing on that issue in the future.
Well, on
Yeah.
that note, we are at time. Thank you both so much. I know I learned a ton, and you put your information in there as far as if anyone has any specific questions. And I hope that this was helpful. We will definitely have it available on our YouTube channel as well. And I do appreciate everyone taking the time. I know I'm leaving here feeling a little like, wow, we've really got to do something. So I think if each one of us talks to, 5 folks and those people talk, I mean, that is what we're going to do. As parents, this is our job to make sure that we're protecting our kids and the future kids, our grandkids and our neighbors' kids and our nieces and nephews to have the same ability and the same opportunities of public school. And it really seems like right now this is in danger of losing that. Thank you so much, and we will see y'all next month. If you want more information, of course, you can reach out to me. I know how to get in touch with these ladies, and we will have our next webinar in March. If you go on our events page on Parenting with Pride, we've got a couple local things going on. If you're in Broward County, we have an AIDS walk. If you're interested, it's going to be a great festival and 5K. There's also a National Day of Reading we're going to put out there for folks. It's a great take action event. And if you're in the Jacksonville area, we have a parent and community in-person summit on February 21st. Other than that, thank you all for being here and have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks.